Picture this. You wake up to snow-capped Himalayan peaks piercing through your bedroom window, the scent of incense drifting from a nearby temple, and your biggest financial worry for the day is whether to splurge on that extra momo for lunch, because it'll only cost you 30 cents. Sound too good to be true? Well, what if I told you that in Nepal, $500 doesn't just get you through the month? It gets you a life that most digital nomads spending $3,000 in Bali can only dream of. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. While everyone's fighting over overpriced co-working spaces in Lisbon or getting scammed by landlords in Mexico City, there's this landlocked kingdom nestled between India and China where your money does not just stretch, it practically multiplies. We're talking about a place where a full meal costs less than your morning Starbucks, where rent for a decent apartment is cheaper than your Netflix subscription, and where the people are so genuinely kind that you'll question everything you thought you knew about hospitality. Now, before you start packing your bags, let me be real with you. This isn't some clickbait fantasy. Nepal isn't perfect. No place is. But what it offers is something increasingly rare in our hyper-connected, overpriced world: authenticity without the premium price tag. You see, while other budget destinations have been discovered, gentrified, and inflated by waves of influencers and remote workers, Nepal remains beautifully, almost stubbornly affordable. Think about it this way. When was the last time you heard someone bragging about their Nepal adventure on Instagram? Exactly. And that's precisely why it might be the move you never saw coming. So here's what we're going to do. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you on a journey through the real Nepal, not the Everest expedition fantasy that costs 40 grand, but the everyday Nepal where ordinary people live extraordinary lives on budgets that would make your accountant weep with joy. We'll walk through bustling Kathmandu markets where haggling is an art form, sit in mountain villages where time moves differently, and yes, we'll break down exactly how that $500 translates into an actual lifestyle. But first, let me ask you something. Comment 1. If you've ever felt trapped by the cost of living in your current city. 2. If you're tired of choosing between saving money and actually living. And 3. If you're ready to discover a place where both might actually be possible. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just about Nepal, it's about reimagining what your life could look like when money stops being the main character in your story. Now, you might be wondering, where exactly is this magical place and why haven't more people caught on? Well, that's where our story really begins. Nepal sits like a hidden jewel between two of the world's most populous nations, and there's a very specific reason why your dollar goes further here than almost anywhere else on Earth. But to understand that, we need to talk about geography, economics, and why sometimes being sandwiched between giants can actually be your greatest advantage. Nepal's location tells a story that most travel blogs completely miss. This isn't just some random country that happens to be cheap. Its affordability is the result of fascinating economic and geographical factors that have shaped everything from how people live to what they eat to how they view money itself. You see, when you're landlocked between India and China, two economic powerhouses with completely different systems, you develop a unique approach to survival that prioritizes community over consumption, resourcefulness over waste. The Nepalese economy runs on what economists call a low-cost, high-value model, though they'd never describe it that way. What this means in practical terms is that labor costs, rent, and basic necessities remain incredibly affordable, because the local economy hasn't been inflated by foreign investment or tourism dollars the way places like Thailand or Costa Rica have been. A construction worker in Kathmandu makes about $60 a month, not because they're being exploited, but because the entire cost structure of society operates at a fundamentally different level. Here's where it gets interesting for us outsiders. The Nepalese rupee has remained relatively stable against the dollar, but more importantly, the local pricing hasn't adjusted to cater to foreign spending power. In most popular expat destinations, you'll find two-tier pricing: local prices and tourist prices. In Nepal, this phenomenon exists, but it's far less pronounced because mass tourism hasn't reached the saturation point that transforms local economies. Think of it this way. In Bali, a local meal might cost $1, but you'll pay $5 for the same meal in an area where foreigners hang out. In Nepal, that differential is much smaller. A dal bait that costs 50 cents in a local joint might cost 75 cents in a tourist area. The markup exists, sure, but it's not predatory. The infrastructure tells another part of this story. Nepal's relatively underdeveloped transportation and utility systems actually work in your favor as a budget traveler. Electricity is cheap because it's largely hydroelectric and government subsidized. Internet is affordable because the government views connectivity as essential infrastructure, not a luxury service. Housing is inexpensive because construction materials are locally sourced and labor costs are low. But here's what really makes Nepal special, and this is something you won't find in any guidebook. The culture itself resists the kind of rapid inflation that destroys budget destinations. Nepalese society has deep cultural values around modesty and community that act as natural barriers to the kind of gentrification that prices out both locals and budget travelers. When your cultural values emphasize contentment over accumulation, you don't get the same pressure to raise prices just because foreigners can afford to pay more. The result is a country where your $500 does not just buy you survival, it buys you entry into a way of life that feels increasingly impossible in the Western world. You're not just getting cheap rent. You're getting access to communities where neighbors still know each other's names, where meals are social events rather than fuel stops, where spirituality isn't a weekend workshop but a daily practice woven into the fabric of ordinary life. And that brings us to something crucial that separates Nepal from other budget destinations. The culture isn't performing for tourists. In places like Goa or Tulum, you often feel like you're watching a show designed for foreign consumption. In Nepal, you're witnessing authentic daily life that happens to be incredibly affordable, rather than affordable life that's been packaged for your consumption. Speaking of daily life, let me paint you a picture that'll help you understand what $500 actually gets you in terms of lived experience. But before we dive into the nuts and bolts of budgets and bus routes, we need to talk about the people. Because understanding Nepalese culture isn't just helpful for your wallet, it's essential for your soul. The first thing that hits you about Nepal isn't the mountains or the temples. It's the way people interact with each other and with you. There's this concept called namaste that everyone thinks they understand because they've been to a yoga class. But experiencing it in Nepal is like the difference between reading about swimming and jumping into the ocean. When a Nepalese person says namaste to you, they're not just greeting you. They're acknowledging the divine spark in you, and they mean it. This spiritual foundation creates a social dynamic that's radically different from what most of us are used to. In Kathmandu, you'll see businessmen in suits stopping to help an elderly woman carry her groceries. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because that's simply what you do. Street vendors will often throw in extra items not to build customer loyalty but because generosity is seen as good karma. Children are taught to touch the feet of elders as a sign of respect, and this reverence for age and wisdom permeates every interaction. Now, let's be honest about the caste system, because pretending it does not exist would be doing you a disservice. Nepal officially abolished caste discrimination. But like anywhere else, social change takes time. What this means practically is that there are subtle social hierarchies you'll notice, particularly in rural areas. However, as a foreigner, you exist somewhat outside these traditional structures, which can actually work in your favor socially. Daily life in urban Nepal moves to a rhythm that'll take some adjustment if you're coming from a Western city. The concept of Nepal time means that meetings start when people arrive, not when the clock says they should. Shops open when the owner feels ready, and close when business is done. This isn't inefficiency. It's a fundamentally different relationship with time that prioritizes human needs over arbitrary schedules. In the mornings, cities wake up with the sound of temple bells and the sight of people performing small rituals, lighting incense, offering flowers, saying prayers. These aren't tourist attractions. They're how millions of people start their day. You'll see office workers stopping at shrines on their way to work, not because they're religious fanatics, but because spiritual practice is as normal as brushing your teeth. The afternoon brings a pace that would drive most Type A personalities crazy but will probably save your sanity. Business slows down. People take time for proper meals. Conversations happen on street corners. Elderly men play cards in parks while children kick around soccer balls made of rags and rubber bands. It's not poverty. It's a culture that values presence over productivity. Evenings are when Nepal really comes alive socially. Families gather for dinner that can last hours. Young people meet in chai shops that serve as informal community centers. Music spills out of small restaurants where locals gather to sing folk songs that have been passed down for generations. This isn't entertainment, it's how community is maintained. The weekend social scene might surprise you. While there are modern bars and clubs in Kathmandu and Pokhara, much of the social life centers around festivals, family gatherings, and community events. Weddings are massive affairs that can last for days and involve entire neighborhoods. Festivals happen monthly and transform ordinary streets into celebrations that rival anything you've seen in Rio or Mumbai. What strikes most foreigners is how conflict is handled. Nepalese culture places enormous emphasis on maintaining harmony and saving face. People will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid direct confrontation, which means that problems get solved through intermediaries, subtle communication, and patient negotiation. This can be frustrating if you're used to direct communication, but it also means you'll rarely encounter the kind of aggressive behavior that is common in stressed urban environments. The relationship with money and possessions also operates on different principles. Sharing is expected within communities. If your neighbor is cooking dinner and you stop by, you'll be offered food whether they have enough or not. If someone has something you need, they'll lend it without expecting formal repayment. This gift economy operates alongside the cash economy and can significantly impact your actual living costs in ways that don't show up in budget breakdowns. Children in Nepal grow up with responsibilities and freedoms that would shock most Western parents. You'll see 8-year-olds confidently navigating busy streets, helping in family businesses, and caring for younger siblings. This isn't neglect. It's a culture that believes children develop strength and wisdom through real-world engagement rather than protective isolation. And here's something that'll change your perspective on happiness. Despite having very little in material terms, Nepalese people consistently rank high in life satisfaction surveys. There's something profound happening here that goes beyond just cheap living costs. It's a culture that has figured out how to find joy in simplicity, meaning in community, and contentment in the present moment. This cultural foundation sets the stage for understanding why food in Nepal isn't just cheap. It's a gateway into the soul of the culture, and that's where our story takes a delicious turn. The first time you sit down for a proper Nepalese meal, you're not just eating. You're participating in a ritual that's remained unchanged for centuries. Picture this. You're in a small restaurant in Kathmandu's Tamil district, and the owner, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands stained from years of cooking, sets down a metal plate in front of you. It's divided into sections like a painter's palette, each holding a different color and texture of food. Rice forms the base, not fancy basmati, but hearty, filling grains that taste like comfort itself. Then comes the dal, a lentil soup that's simultaneously simple and complex, seasoned with turmeric that stains everything golden, cumin that fills the air with warmth, and garlic that's been fried until it's sweet and nutty. This isn't just soup, it's liquid comfort, the kind of food that makes you understand why Nepalese people can work physical jobs at high altitudes and still smile at the end of the day. The vegetables tell the story of seasons and geography. In autumn, you'll get pumpkin curry that's sweet and spicy at the same time. In spring, there are greens that were picked that morning from gardens you can see from the restaurant window. Everything is cooked in mustard oil that gives the food a distinctive flavor that you'll either love immediately or learn to crave. There's no middle ground. But here's where it gets interesting for your budget. This entire meal, enough food to keep you satisfied for hours, costs about 60 cents. Not 60 cents as a special deal or tourist price, but 60 cents because that's what food costs when it's made from local ingredients by people who learned to cook from their grandmothers, not culinary school. The momo situation deserves its own conversation because these dumplings have become Nepal's unofficial national dish, and for good reason. Picture a dumpling that's somewhere between a Chinese bao and a Tibetan dumpling, filled with buffalo meat that's been seasoned with ginger, garlic, and onions, then steamed until the wrapper becomes translucent and the filling becomes incredibly tender. They're served with a sauce that's spicy, tangy, and slightly sweet, a combination that works magic on your taste buds. Here's what'll blow your mind. You can get 10 momos, enough for a complete meal, for less than $1. 10 momos from a street vendor might cost 50 cents. 10 momos from a nice restaurant in a tourist area might cost $1.50. The difference in quality? Minimal. The difference in experience? The street vendors might actually be better because they've been perfecting their recipe for decades, not trying to cater to foreign expectations. The street food scene operates on principles that would terrify health inspectors but produce some of the most delicious and affordable food you'll ever eat. There are vendors who've been working the same corner for 20 years, building loyal customer bases through consistency and flavor rather than marketing and ambiance. They know their regulars' preferences, their dietary restrictions, their family situations. It's not just commerce, it's community. Chai culture in Nepal deserves special mention because it's where social life happens. Every neighborhood has chai shops, small spaces with plastic chairs and wood-fired stoves where tea is boiled with milk, sugar, and spices until it becomes this incredibly rich, warming drink that costs about 10 cents per glass. These aren't coffee shops in the Western sense. They're community centers where people gather to discuss everything from politics to philosophy to whose daughter is getting married next month. The morning chai ritual is sacred. Before work, after work, during breaks, people gather around these small stoves and engage in conversations that range from profound to silly, always accompanied by the sound of bubbling tea and the smell of cardamom and ginger. As a foreigner, once you become a regular at a chai shop, you're essentially adopted into the neighborhood social network. Local alcohol tells another interesting story. Roxy, the traditional rice wine, is often homemade and incredibly strong. It's not something you drink for pleasure in the Western sense. It's medicine, celebration, and social lubrication all rolled into one. During festivals, neighbors will share Roxy that's been aged for months or years, and refusing is considered extremely rude. The good news is that it's usually free when offered, and the bad news is that it's strong enough to strip paint. Beer, mostly local brands like Everest and Gorka, costs about $1 in shops and maybe $2 in restaurants. Wine is largely imported and expensive, but honestly, when you're eating food this flavorful and spicy, beer is usually the better choice anyway. The meal timing and social aspects will require some adjustment if you're used to eating alone or on the go. Breakfast is often just tea and maybe some beaten rice with yogurt. Lunch is the main meal, the dal bet we talked about, and it's eaten with hands in a way that's both practical and ritualistic. Dinner is lighter, often just rice and vegetables, eaten early because people wake up early. Food shopping is an adventure in itself. Local markets are sensory overloads where vendors sell vegetables that were harvested that morning, spices that were ground by hand, and tea that was picked from bushes you can see on distant hillsides. Everything is incredibly fresh because refrigeration is limited and turnover is high. A week's worth of vegetables for one person might cost $3, and the quality is often better than what you'd find in expensive organic stores in Western cities. The secret to eating well on a budget in Nepal isn't just knowing where to go, It's understanding that food is social currency. When you become a regular somewhere, portions get bigger, extra items appear on your plate, and sometimes your bill mysteriously becomes smaller. This isn't charity. It's how business relationships work in a culture that values long-term connections over short-term profits. Restaurant timing follows local rhythms rather than tourist expectations. The best local places often run out of food by early afternoon because they cook a certain amount each day and close when it's gone. This ensures freshness, but means you need to adjust your meal schedule to align with local patterns rather than your home country habits. Now, as we savor these incredible flavors and contemplate how food connects us to culture, there's another aspect of Nepalese society that's equally complex and fascinating: the role of women, beauty standards, and social dynamics that shape everything from daily interactions to long-term relationships. Walking through Kathmandu at dawn, you'll notice something remarkable. The city is largely run by women. They're sweeping streets, opening shops, preparing food for their families, and managing household finances before most men have even woken up. This creates an interesting contradiction that defines much of Nepalese gender dynamics. Women often have enormous practical power and responsibility while operating within traditional social structures that formally place men in leadership roles. Nepalese women embody a kind of strength that's different from Western feminist ideals but equally powerful. They're raised to be resourceful, resilient, and incredibly capable of managing complex family and social dynamics. You'll see women carrying enormous loads up mountain paths while maintaining conversations and keeping track of multiple children. They negotiate in markets with skills that would impress professional diplomats, and they manage family finances with precision that would make accountants jealous. The beauty standards here operate on completely different principles than what you might be used to. Fair skin is considered beautiful, which reflects historical caste and class associations rather than Western influence. But beyond skin tone, Nepalese beauty ideals emphasize grace, modesty, and competence over purely physical attributes. A woman who can manage a household efficiently, cook well, and maintain family harmony is considered more attractive than someone who's simply physically beautiful but lacks practical skills. Traditional dress tells its own story about women's roles and status. The sari and traditional Nepalese outfits aren't just clothing, they're social communication systems. The colors, patterns, and styles indicate marital status, social class, regional origin, and even religious affiliation. Married women wear red and gold, widows traditionally wear white, and unmarried women have more freedom in color choices. These aren't arbitrary fashion rules. They're ways of maintaining social order and communication in communities where people need to quickly understand social relationships. Modern Nepalese women, particularly in urban areas, navigate between traditional expectations and contemporary opportunities in ways that create fascinating cultural hybrids. You'll see women in traditional dress using smartphones to manage international business deals, or students in Western clothing who still participate in ancient religious ceremonies with deep reverence. This isn't cultural confusion. It's cultural evolution happening in real time. The dating and relationship culture requires careful understanding if you're a foreign man considering romantic connections. Traditional Nepalese society is quite conservative regarding premarital relationships, but this varies significantly between urban and rural areas, educated and non-educated families, and different ethnic groups. What remains consistent is the expectation that relationships should have serious intent. Casual dating in the Western sense is still relatively uncommon and can be misunderstood. Marriage traditions involve extensive family negotiations and considerations that go far beyond the preferences of the couple involved. Families consider economic compatibility, social status, horoscope compatibility, and long-term family harmony when arranging marriages. While love marriages are becoming more common, particularly in urban areas, family approval remains crucial for social acceptance. For foreign men, understanding these dynamics is essential. Nepalese women who are interested in relationships with foreigners are often from more educated, cosmopolitan backgrounds, but they still carry cultural expectations about family involvement, long-term commitment, and social respectability. Casual relationships that might be normal in Western contexts can have serious social consequences for Nepalese women, particularly in smaller communities. The daily lives of women vary dramatically between urban and rural settings. In Kathmandu, you'll find women working as doctors, lawyers, business owners, and government officials. They drive motorcycles through chaotic traffic, manage complex professional responsibilities, and participate fully in public life. In rural areas, women's lives often revolve more around agricultural work, family management, and traditional crafts, but their influence within these spheres is substantial. Education has transformed opportunities for many women, but cultural expectations about family roles remain strong. Even highly educated women often face pressure to balance professional ambitions with traditional expectations about marriage, childbearing, and family care. This creates interesting tensions and negotiations within families and relationships. The concept of women's safety in Nepal requires nuanced understanding. While violent crime against women exists, cultural norms around respect for women, particularly older women and mothers, create certain protections that don't exist in many other countries. However, women still face restrictions on movement and behavior that can seem limiting from Western perspectives, though many Nepalese women don't experience these as restrictions but as cultural frameworks that provide security and social position. Economic independence for women often happens within family structures rather than individual independence. Women might control significant family resources and make important financial decisions while maintaining traditional roles within marriage and family hierarchy. This creates forms of power and influence that don't always match Western definitions of independence, but can be equally effective. The mother-in-law relationship deserves special mention because it significantly impacts married women's lives. Traditional joint family systems mean that new wives often live with their husband's family, where the mother-in-law holds significant authority over household management and child-rearing decisions. These relationships can be supportive mentorships or sources of tension, depending on personalities and circumstances. Religious and spiritual life offers women important sources of community and influence. Women often serve as guardians of family religious practices, managing household shrines, organizing festival celebrations, and maintaining spiritual traditions. During major festivals, women's roles become central to community celebrations, giving them significant social visibility and influence. What strikes many foreign observers is how Nepalese women navigate modernity while maintaining cultural connections in ways that create new forms of identity rather than simply adopting Western models. They're creating hybrid approaches to gender roles that honor traditional values while expanding opportunities and expectations. This complex dance between tradition and change becomes even more visible during Nepal's incredible festival seasons, where the spiritual and social fabric of the culture reveals itself in explosions of color, sound, and community celebration that transform ordinary streets into venues of transcendent joy. The first time you experience Dashain in Nepal, you realize that everything you thought you knew about festivals and celebrations was just preparation for this moment. Imagine entire cities emptying as millions of people return to their ancestral villages, transforming urban centers into ghost towns, while rural areas explode with activity, color, and the sound of celebration that continues for 15 days straight. Dashain isn't just a festival. It's when Nepal becomes itself most completely. It typically falls in September or October, and the preparation begins weeks before the official start. Families clean their homes obsessively, not just for cleanliness but as a spiritual preparation. They paint their houses, repair anything that needs fixing, and buy new clothes that they'll wear for the first time during the festival. The anticipation builds like nowhere else you've ever experienced. The festival celebrates the victory of good over evil, but what that means practically is that for 15 days, normal social rules are suspended and replaced by celebration, family connection, and spiritual practice that transforms the entire country. On the 10th day, called Bijaya Dashami, the celebration reaches its peak with rituals that have remained unchanged for over 1,000 years. Picture this. Families gather in courtyards and living rooms where elders place tikka, a mixture of rice, yogurt, and vermilion, on the foreheads of younger family members while offering blessings for the coming year. But this isn't just a symbolic gesture. The blessings are specific, heartfelt wishes for health, prosperity, success, and happiness. Children receive money along with the tikka, but more importantly, they receive the concentrated love and hopes of their entire extended family. The food during Dashain deserves its own epic poem. Families prepare feast after feast, with meat dishes that are usually reserved for special occasions taking center stage. Goat curry, buffalo dishes, and elaborate rice preparations appear on tables that groan under the weight of abundance. What's remarkable is that these feasts are shared not just with family but with anyone who stops by. Neighbors, friends, even strangers who happen to be visiting are invited to sit and eat until they can't possibly consume another bite. Holi, the festival of colors, transforms Nepal into what looks like a giant paint fight organized by gods with an excellent sense of humor. Usually falling in March, Holi officially lasts 2 days, but the celebration can extend for a week in some areas. The science behind Holi is actually fascinating. The colored powders are traditionally made from natural ingredients that have medicinal properties. So you're not just getting covered in colors, you're participating in ancient wellness practices. The morning of Holi begins with ritual bonfires that represent burning away negativity and bad luck from the previous year. But by afternoon, the streets become battlegrounds of joy where normal social hierarchies dissolve completely. Children throw colors at adults, servants playfully attack their employers with colored water, and strangers become friends through shared laughter and multicolored chaos. What most outsiders don't realize is that Holi has deep social functions beyond just fun. It's one of the few times in the year when caste, class, and social distinctions become temporarily irrelevant. A street sweeper can splash colors on a government official, and not only is this acceptable, it's encouraged. These temporary reversals of social order serve important psychological and community functions, allowing people to express themselves in ways that aren't normally permissible. The religious festivals reveal Nepal's unique position as one of the few places where Hinduism and Buddhism have coexisted and influenced each other for over 1,000 years. Buddha Jayanti, celebrating the birth of Buddha, is observed with equal reverence by Hindu and Buddhist communities. Swayambhunath, the famous monkey temple, attracts Buddhist pilgrims and Hindu devotees who worship there side by side, often participating in each other's ceremonies. Tihar, Nepal's version of Diwali, spreads celebration across 5 days, with each day dedicated to honoring different aspects of creation. The first day honors crows, the second day honors dogs, the third day honors cows, the fourth day celebrates different aspects depending on regional traditions, and the fifth day celebrates brothers. But what makes Tihar special is how it connects humans with animals and nature in ways that feel both ancient and urgently modern. During the day dedicated to dogs, you'll see people throughout Nepal placing marigold garlands around dogs' necks and offering them special food. Street dogs, pets, and working dogs all receive equal honor. This isn't sentimentality. It's recognition of the interconnectedness of all life forms that forms the foundation of both Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. The Tihar lights are breathtaking in ways that no photograph can capture. Entire cities twinkle with oil lamps, candles, and electric lights that transform ordinary neighborhoods into fairy tale landscapes. But unlike purely decorative lighting, each light has spiritual significance. They're guides for Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and prosperity, to find her way into homes and hearts. Indra Jatra in Kathmandu turns the entire city into a living theater where ancient stories are reenacted through elaborate processions, masked dances, and ritual performances that can last for 8 days. The festival centers around a chariot procession carrying the living goddess Kumari, a young girl who is worshipped as the embodiment of divine power. Watching thousands of people prostrate themselves before a child who sits in perfect stillness and dignity is profoundly moving, regardless of your religious beliefs. Local festivals vary by region and ethnic group, creating a festival calendar that means somewhere in Nepal, someone is celebrating something almost every week of the year. The Hmong communities have their own New Year celebrations, Newari communities have elaborate festivals that can last for months, and Tibetan communities observe festivals that connect them to their ancestral homeland while adapting to their Nepalese context. The music during festivals isn't performance, it's participation. Traditional instruments like the madal, drums, sarangi, string instruments, and bansuri, flutes, create soundscapes that seem to emerge from the landscape itself. People don't just listen to music during festivals, they create it collectively through singing, clapping, and dancing that can continue for hours without any apparent fatigue. What strikes most foreigners is how festivals in Nepal manage to be both deeply spiritual and wildly joyful simultaneously. There's no separation between sacred and celebratory. The more joy you experience, the more spiritual the celebration becomes. This integration of spirituality and celebration creates community experiences that feel transformative, rather than just entertaining. The economic impact of festivals is substantial but operates on different principles than commercial holiday seasons. Families save money throughout the year specifically for festival celebrations, not to buy gifts for individuals but to create collective experiences that strengthen family and community bonds. The money flows through local communities rather than corporate entities, supporting local artisans, food producers, and small businesses. These celebrations create temporal landmarks in Nepalese life that provide rhythm and meaning beyond just work and survival. They create shared memories, reinforce cultural values, and provide opportunities for spiritual growth and community connection that have sustained Nepalese culture through centuries of political and economic changes. But festivals are temporary peaks in daily life that is sustained by more practical considerations, like exactly how far your money goes when you're actually living here day to day, which brings us to the numbers that make all of this cultural richness financially accessible. Let's break down that $500 budget with the kind of detail that will help you understand not just what things cost, but how costs connect to the lifestyle we've been exploring. But first, I need to be completely honest with you about something most budget guides won't tell you. There are actually 3 different cost structures operating in Nepal, and which one you access depends on how you approach living there. The local price structure is what actual Nepalese people pay for things. A room in a shared house might cost $30 per month, a full meal costs 50 cents, and local transportation runs about 10 cents per ride. But accessing these prices requires integration into local communities, speaking some Nepali, and living exactly like locals live, which can be challenging but incredibly rewarding if you're up for it. The expat price structure runs about 50 to 100% higher than local prices, but still incredibly affordable by Western standards. This gets you accommodation with reliable electricity and hot water, meals from restaurants that cater to foreign tastes, and transportation options that prioritize comfort over pure economy. Most digital nomads and long-term travelers operate within this price range. The tourist price structure can be 3 to 5 times higher than local prices, but it's still cheaper than most Western cities. This includes hotels instead of local accommodation, restaurants in tourist areas, and guided activities rather than independent exploration. You can definitely live well in Nepal for $500 even at tourist prices, but you'll have a very different experience than someone who learns to navigate local systems. So here's how $500 breaks down realistically across these different approaches. For accommodation, Accessing local prices might get you a basic room for $30 to $50 per month, while expat-friendly options run $60 to $150 monthly. Tourist-level accommodation starts around $100 but can go much higher depending on your comfort requirements. Let me paint you a picture of what these different accommodation levels actually mean in daily life. Local-level housing might mean a room in a family compound where you share bathroom facilities, have intermittent electricity, and participate in household routines like shared meals and family responsibilities. This is not roughing it. It's authentic cultural immersion that money can't buy at any price in most countries. Expat-level accommodation typically means a private room or a small apartment with your own bathroom, more reliable utilities, and landlords who are accustomed to foreign tenants and their different expectations about things like privacy, lease terms, and maintenance. These places often come semi-furnished and include basics like bedding and kitchen equipment. Food costs vary dramatically based on where and how you eat, but the variation is smaller than accommodation costs. Eating entirely at local places, street vendors, neighborhood restaurants, home cooking, might run $50 to $75 per month for someone with a decent appetite. Mixing local places with expat-friendly restaurants might cost $75 to $125 monthly. Eating primarily at tourist restaurants could push food costs to $150 to $200 monthly, but you'd have to work hard to spend that much. Transportation costs are almost negligible if you adapt to local systems. Local buses cost pennies, shared taxis are slightly more expensive but still incredibly cheap, and even private taxis for longer distances cost less than most Western bus fares. A motorcycle rental for a month might cost $60 to $100, giving you complete mobility at costs that would barely cover a week of public transportation in most Western cities. Internet and communication costs are remarkably low. A local SIM card with substantial data costs about $5 per month. Wi-Fi is widely available and usually reliable enough for remote work, though speeds can be inconsistent during peak hours or bad weather. International calling is cheap enough that you can maintain regular contact with home without budget concerns. Healthcare costs deserve special attention because they can significantly impact your budget planning. Basic medical care is extremely affordable. Doctor visits might cost $3 to $5, prescription medications cost a fraction of Western prices, and routine procedures are incredibly inexpensive. However, serious medical issues might require evacuation to better facilities in India or Thailand, so health insurance remains important. Entertainment and social costs operate on completely different principles than most places. Many social activities, festivals, community gatherings, religious ceremonies, are free and genuinely welcoming to respectful foreign participation. Paid entertainment like movies, concerts, or organized activities costs very little. A movie ticket might cost $2, and live music events rarely cost more than $5. Personal items and shopping present interesting budgeting challenges. Local products, food, basic clothing, household items are incredibly cheap. Imported goods, electronics, specialty foods, brand name items can cost more than they would in Western countries due to import duties and limited availability. This creates interesting adaptation opportunities where you might discover local alternatives that work better and cost less than imported options you're used to. Seasonal cost variations can significantly impact budgets. During festival seasons, food and transportation costs can increase substantially due to increased demand. Tourist seasons affect accommodation and activity costs in popular areas. Monsoon seasons might increase food costs due to transportation difficulties but reduce accommodation costs as fewer tourists visit. Hidden costs often surprise newcomers but are usually manageable with planning. Visa extensions, occasional bribes for bureaucratic processes, emergency transportation during strikes or bad weather, and replacement of items that break or wear out in challenging conditions can add unexpected expenses to budgets. The social aspects of money in Nepal can actually reduce your costs if you understand and respect them. gift-giving during festivals, contributing to community events, and reciprocating hospitality are cultural expectations that require budget allocation but often result in saved costs elsewhere as you become integrated into social networks that provide support and opportunities. Banking and money management requires some adaptation. ATMs are widely available in cities but can be unreliable, and card transaction fees can add up. Many transactions still operate on cash basis, so you'll need to maintain more cash reserves than you might be used to. Money changers offer better rates than banks but require careful attention to avoid counterfeit currency issues. Remote work considerations can impact budgets in interesting ways. Reliable internet for professional work might require upgrading accommodation or paying for premium internet services. Co-working spaces are available in major cities and cost $20 to $50 monthly. Backup power solutions for unreliable electricity might require initial investment, but are essential for consistent remote work. The psychological aspects of money in Nepal often surprise people. When everything costs so little, it's easy to become careless with spending, but it's also easy to become overly focused on saving money to the point where you miss cultural experiences that would enrich your life immeasurably. Finding balance between budget consciousness and cultural engagement is an ongoing calibration process. What most budget breakdowns miss is how cost considerations connect to transportation choices, which in Nepal means adapting to systems that prioritize community, efficiency, and adventure over individual comfort and predictability. Getting around Nepal is like participating in a daily adventure that combines public transportation, extreme sports, and social networking into experiences that are simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. The first time you squeeze into a microbus designed for 20 people that's carrying 35 passengers plus luggage, chickens, and someone's bicycle, you'll question your life choices. By the 10th time, you'll realize you're participating in a form of community cooperation that makes the whole system work despite appearing completely chaotic. Local buses represent the backbone of Nepal's transportation system and operate on principles that prioritize access over comfort. These vehicles, often decorated with colorful religious imagery and equipped with sound systems that seem designed to test the limits of human hearing tolerance, connect even the most remote villages to urban centers at costs that make Western public transportation seem like luxury services. A typical bus journey in Nepal requires mental and physical preparation that guidebooks rarely adequately describe. Seats are designed for people smaller than most Westerners, legroom is a theoretical concept, and personal space dissolves completely as passengers adjust to accommodate maximum capacity. But here's what's remarkable. Instead of creating hostility and discomfort, these conditions often generate camaraderie and mutual assistance that transforms transportation into social experience. The conductors, usually young men who hang out of moving buses while collecting fares and directing traffic, possess skills that would impress Olympic gymnasts. They leap on and off moving vehicles, navigate crowded aisles while the bus bounces over road conditions that would challenge off-road vehicles, and maintain detailed mental records of who paid what fare to which destination. Their ability to calculate complex fare structures while the bus careens around mountain curves defies logical explanation. Road conditions tell their own story about Nepal's geography and infrastructure challenges. What are optimistically called highways often resemble goat paths that have been upgraded slightly to accommodate vehicles. During monsoon season, roads disappear under landslides, become rivers, or simply dissolve into mud that can trap vehicles for hours or days. During dry season, dust clouds create visibility conditions that transform driving into acts of faith rather than skill. Motorcycle culture in Nepal operates on completely different principles than Western motorcycle culture. Here, motorcycles aren't recreational vehicles or lifestyle statements. They're essential transportation tools that enable economic survival and family mobility. You'll see motorcycles carrying entire families, delivering goods that would require trucks in other countries, and navigating terrain that would challenge dedicated off-road vehicles. Renting a motorcycle as a foreigner opens up transportation possibilities that dramatically expand your ability to explore Nepal independently, but it requires serious consideration of risk tolerance and driving skills. Traffic rules exist theoretically, but operate more as suggestions than enforceable regulations. Lane discipline is non-existent. Traffic signals are often treated as decorative suggestions, and defensive driving means assuming that everyone else will do the most unpredictable thing possible at any moment. The mountain highway system presents some of the most spectacular and terrifying driving conditions anywhere in the world. Roads carved into cliff faces, bridges that appear structurally questionable, and weather conditions that can change from sunny to life-threatening within minutes create driving experiences that range from breathtakingly beautiful to genuinely dangerous. The views are incredible, but they come with risks that require constant attention and respect. Shared taxis operate as informal public transportation that fills gaps in the bus system while providing more comfort and flexibility at slightly higher costs. These vehicles, usually small cars or vans, run fixed routes but adjust schedules based on passenger demand. They represent middle ground between buses and private transportation, offering reasonable comfort at affordable prices while maintaining the social aspects of shared travel. Within cities, transportation options multiply and costs remain remarkably low. Auto rickshaws, known locally as tempos, provide short-distance transportation that's faster than walking, but cheaper than private taxis. These three-wheeled vehicles navigate traffic conditions that would paralyze larger vehicles while providing transportation at costs that rarely exceed $1 for trips within city centers. Walking culture in Nepal operates on different assumptions than pedestrian systems in Western cities. Sidewalks exist sporadically and are often occupied by vendors, parked vehicles, or construction materials. Pedestrians share road space with motorcycles, buses, cars, bicycles, and occasionally livestock in ways that require constant attention, but somehow result in fewer serious accidents than you'd expect given the apparent chaos. Bicycle transportation offers interesting possibilities for short-distance travel and local exploration, but requires adaptation to traffic conditions and road surfaces that challenge both equipment and rider skills. Local bicycles are built for durability rather than performance, and navigating traffic requires confidence and constant alertness that might intimidate casual cyclists. Long-distance transportation between cities involves choices between speed, comfort, and cost that require careful consideration of priorities and risk tolerance. Tourist buses offer more comfort and safety at higher prices. Local buses prioritize affordability over comfort, and private vehicles provide flexibility but require driving skills and risk tolerance that not everyone possesses. Flight transportation within Nepal opens up possibilities for reaching remote areas that would require days of ground transportation, but operates on schedules and safety standards that require flexibility and patience. Weather conditions frequently disrupt flight schedules, particularly to mountain airports, and safety records require careful research before booking flights to remote destinations. Seasonal transportation considerations significantly impact travel planning and costs. Monsoon season makes many roads impassable and increases transportation costs due to limited options and increased risks. Tourist seasons increase transportation demand and prices, particularly for popular destinations. Festival seasons can completely disrupt normal transportation schedules as the entire country shifts into celebration mode. The social aspects of transportation in Nepal create opportunities for cultural interaction that don't exist in more structured transportation systems. Long bus journeys become social experiences where passengers share food, stories, and assistance with each other. Transportation delays become opportunities for impromptu cultural exchanges rather than frustrating inconveniences. What emerges from navigating Nepal's transportation systems is an understanding of how mobility connects to community, how efficiency can coexist with apparent chaos, and how transportation systems reflect cultural values that prioritize access and inclusion over individual comfort and predictability. These transportation adventures inevitably lead you to Nepal's natural wonders, where the country reveals why it's become synonymous with some of the most spectacular landscapes on Earth, and where your $500 budget can provide access to wilderness experiences that cost thousands of dollars elsewhere. Standing at Nagarkot at dawn, watching the first light hit the Himalayan range, you understand why people spend fortunes to witness moments like this. The mountains don't just rise from the landscape, they seem to emerge from another dimension. Their peaks so sharp and white against the deep blue sky that they look like they've been painted by someone with an unlimited palette and no concern for realistic proportions. What's remarkable is that reaching this viewpoint costs less than a taxi ride in most Western cities. The Annapurna region offers trekking experiences that rival anything in the world, but at costs that make it accessible to travelers on modest budgets rather than just adventure tourists with unlimited resources. A guided trek with full support, porters, meals, accommodation, might cost $15 to $25 per day, while independent trekking can cost as little as $8 to $12 daily. These aren't budget compromises. They're authentic mountain experiences that provide the same views, challenges, and sense of accomplishment as expeditions that cost 10 times as much in other countries. Pokhara represents Nepal's adventure tourism center, but it maintains an authenticity that distinguishes it from similar destinations that have been developed primarily for foreign tourists. The lake reflects the Annapurna Range in ways that create perfect postcard images, but it's also a working lake where local fishermen cast nets at dawn and families come to perform religious ceremonies at sunset. The paragliding, rafting, and adventure activities are world-class but operate within a local context that keeps them connected to Nepalese culture rather than international adventure tourism formulas. The biodiversity in Nepal's national parks rivals anything in Africa or South America, but receives far less international attention. Chitwan National Park offers opportunities to see rhinoceros, tigers, elephants, and hundreds of bird species in their natural habitats, but the experience feels more authentic and less commercialized than similar parks in other countries. A 3-day jungle safari, including all meals, accommodation, and activities, might cost $60 to $100, making it accessible to travelers who couldn't afford similar experiences elsewhere. Bardia National Park provides even more remote wilderness experiences with fewer tourists and lower costs, but requires more time and flexibility to reach. The wildlife viewing opportunities are excellent. The accommodations are comfortable but simple, and the entire experience feels like discovering a secret that hasn't been packaged for mass tourism consumption. The Middle Hills region, between the mountains and the plains, offers trekking and cultural experiences that most visitors completely miss, but that provide some of the most authentic insights into traditional Nepalese life. Villages that haven't been significantly impacted by tourism offer homestay opportunities where you can experience daily life, participate in agricultural activities, and engage with communities that maintain traditional practices while adapting to modern changes. The mountain valleys beyond the main trekking routes provide wilderness experiences that feel genuinely remote and challenging. These areas require more preparation, higher fitness levels, and greater risk tolerance, but they offer solitude and natural beauty that's increasingly rare in our connected world. The costs remain low, but the requirements for self-sufficiency and wilderness skills are substantial. Sacred natural sites throughout Nepal combine spiritual significance with natural beauty in ways that create deeply moving experiences regardless of your religious background. Gosai Kunda, a high-altitude lake sacred to both Hindus and Buddhists, requires a challenging trek but rewards visitors with spiritual atmosphere and mountain scenery that feels transformative. The pilgrimage aspects add cultural depth to what could otherwise be just scenic hiking. The monsoon season transforms Nepal's natural landscape in ways that reveal different aspects of the country's beauty, while presenting different challenges and opportunities. Waterfalls that are modest streams during dry season become spectacular cascades. Valleys turn emerald green, and the air becomes clean and fresh in ways that provide relief from dry season dust and pollution. However, trekking becomes more challenging. Roads become unreliable, and weather conditions require different preparation and expectations. Adventure activities in Nepal operate on risk-reward calculations that differ significantly from more regulated adventure tourism destinations. The activities are often more authentic and challenging, but safety standards and emergency response capabilities may not match what you'd find in developed countries. This creates opportunities for genuine adventure experiences, but requires careful research and realistic assessment of your skills and risk tolerance. Local guide and porter services provide employment opportunities for mountain communities while enhancing visitor experiences through cultural knowledge and practical support. Understanding the economics and social impact of these services helps visitors make choices that support local communities while getting better experiences. Porter wages and working conditions have improved significantly in recent years, but conscious travelers should still research operators who prioritize fair treatment and safety. The environmental impact of tourism in Nepal's natural areas requires consideration from responsible travelers. Popular trekking routes show signs of environmental stress from increased visitor numbers, and remote areas can be negatively impacted by visitors who don't follow leave-no-trace principles. Understanding and minimizing your environmental impact becomes both ethical responsibility and practical necessity for preserving these incredible landscapes. Photography opportunities in Nepal's natural settings are extraordinary, but they require understanding of cultural sensitivities around sacred sites, wildlife photography ethics, and practical considerations like equipment protection in challenging conditions. The light in the Himalayas creates photographic opportunities that are literally impossible to replicate elsewhere, but capturing them requires patience, preparation, and respect for the environments and communities you're photographing. What strikes most visitors is how Nepal's natural beauty exists not as preserved wilderness separate from human communities, but as landscape that's been shaped by centuries of human interaction while maintaining its essential wildness. Villages nestled in mountain valleys, terraced hillsides that follow natural contours, and sacred groves protected by religious traditions create human-nature relationships that feel both ancient and sustainable. This integration of human communities with spectacular natural environments leads naturally to practical considerations about safety, health, and the logistics of actually living in a place where beauty and challenges coexist in ways that require constant adaptation and awareness. Let's talk honestly about safety in Nepal, because the reality is more nuanced than either the adventure tourism marketing or the concerned family warnings would have you believe. Nepal is simultaneously one of the safest countries in terms of violent crime and one of the more challenging countries in terms of everyday risks that require constant attention and adaptation. Violent crime against foreigners is remarkably rare in Nepal. The cultural values around hospitality, the Buddhist and Hindu emphasis on nonviolence, and the economic importance of tourism create strong social incentives to protect visitors. You're far more likely to have locals go out of their way to help you than to encounter anyone trying to harm you. Women traveling alone often report feeling safer walking through Kathmandu at night than they do in many Western cities. However, what Nepal lacks in violent crime it makes up for in everyday hazards that can catch unprepared visitors off guard. Traffic conditions that would be considered emergency situations in most countries are normal daily occurrences here. Construction sites often lack safety barriers, electrical systems may not meet international standards, and natural hazards like landslides and earthquakes are ongoing realities rather than remote possibilities. Healthcare infrastructure varies dramatically between urban and rural areas. which significantly impacts risk calculations for different activities and locations. Kathmandu and Pokhara have hospitals and clinics that can handle most medical emergencies and routine healthcare needs, though standards may differ from what you're accustomed to. Rural areas may have basic health posts but lack equipment and expertise for serious medical issues. The 2015 earthquakes highlighted both Nepal's vulnerability to natural disasters and the resilience of its people and infrastructure in responding to major challenges. Buildings constructed after the earthquakes generally meet better safety standards, but many older structures remain vulnerable. Understanding earthquake safety basics becomes practical necessity rather than theoretical knowledge when you're living in a seismically active region. Air quality in Kathmandu presents health challenges that require ongoing attention and adaptation. During dry season, dust and pollution can reach levels that affect respiratory health, particularly for people with pre-existing conditions. The monsoon season clears the air dramatically, but the trade-off includes increased risk of waterborne diseases and transportation difficulties. Water and food safety require constant attention, but become manageable with proper precautions and gradual adaptation. Most long-term residents develop stronger resistance to local bacteria and parasites, but the adjustment period can involve digestive issues that range from mild discomfort to serious illness. Understanding prevention, recognizing symptoms, and knowing when to seek medical attention becomes essential practical knowledge. Altitude-related health issues affect anyone traveling to higher elevations, regardless of fitness level or experience. Acute mountain sickness can occur at elevations as low as 8,000 feet, which includes many popular trekking destinations. Understanding symptoms, prevention strategies, and emergency response becomes literally life-saving knowledge for mountain travel. Mental health considerations often surprise long-term visitors to Nepal. The cultural differences, language barriers, infrastructure challenges, and physical demands of living in Nepal can create stress and isolation that affects psychological well-being. Having strategies for maintaining mental health, building social connections, and dealing with culture shock becomes important for successful long-term stays. Insurance considerations require careful research and planning, because standard travel insurance may not cover many activities that are routine parts of life in Nepal. Motorcycle riding, trekking above certain elevations, and adventure activities may require specialized coverage. Medical evacuation insurance becomes particularly important given the limited medical facilities in remote areas. Emergency preparedness takes on different dimensions in Nepal because the infrastructure and response systems you might take for granted elsewhere may not be available when needed. Having emergency cash reserves, backup communication methods, and basic medical supplies becomes practical necessity rather than excessive caution. Digital nomad-specific safety considerations include reliable internet for income-generating work, backup power solutions for unreliable electricity supply, and secure storage for expensive equipment in accommodations that may lack Western-style security features. Understanding local customs around valuable possessions and taking appropriate precautions prevents problems before they occur. Personal security measures in Nepal focus more on situational awareness and cultural sensitivity than on protecting against crime. Understanding local customs around dress, behavior, and social interaction prevents misunderstandings that could create uncomfortable or unsafe situations. Learning basic Nepali phrases and cultural norms enhances safety by improving communication and demonstrating respect. Weather-related safety considerations vary dramatically by season and location. Monsoon season brings risks of landslides, flooding, and transportation disruptions that can strand travelers in remote areas. Winter conditions in mountain areas can be life-threatening for unprepared travelers. Understanding seasonal patterns and having appropriate equipment becomes essential for safe travel. Political stability in Nepal has improved significantly since the end of the civil conflict, but occasional strikes, protests, and political demonstrations can disrupt transportation and services. Understanding political dynamics and having flexible plans helps navigate these situations without compromising safety or travel plans. The legal system in Nepal operates differently than Western legal systems, and foreigners may not understand their rights or the proper procedures for dealing with legal issues. Having contacts with embassies, local lawyers, or experienced expat communities provides important resources for navigating legal challenges should they arise. Drug laws in Nepal are strictly enforced despite the country's reputation for tolerance, and penalties for drug-related offenses can be severe. Understanding and respecting local laws prevents legal problems that could have serious consequences for visitors and long-term residents. What emerges from understanding safety in Nepal is that most risks are manageable with proper preparation, cultural sensitivity, and ongoing awareness, but they require active attention rather than passive assumption that systems will protect you as they might in more developed countries. This brings us full circle to the practical realities of establishing yourself in Nepal, the visas, documentation, and bureaucratic requirements that transform Nepal from a travel destination into a potential home base for your $500 a month lifestyle. The visa situation in Nepal strikes an interesting balance between accessibility and bureaucratic complexity that reflects the country's approach to foreign visitors. Tourist visas are available on arrival for most nationalities, can be extended multiple times, and cost significantly less than similar visas for other countries. But the extension process requires patience and understanding of local bureaucratic culture. Initial tourist visas can be obtained at Tribhuvan International Airport or at land border crossings for fees that range from $30 to $125 depending on duration. 15-day, 30-day, and 90-day options provide flexibility for different travel plans, and the process is generally straightforward if you have the required documentation and fees in acceptable currency. Visa extensions require visits to the Department of Immigration in Kathmandu or Pokhara, where you'll encounter bureaucratic processes that operate on different timescales and procedural assumptions than you might be used to. The good news is that extensions are generally approved for people who follow proper procedures and maintain clean records. The challenging news is that proper procedures may not be clearly explained and can change without notice. Multiple entry and exit requirements for visa extensions mean that some long-term visitors develop border-run strategies that involve brief trips to India to reset their visa status. These border runs have become routine parts of long-term budget travel strategies, but they require planning and flexibility because border procedures and requirements can change unexpectedly. Student visas provide longer-term residence options for people enrolled in language courses, university programs, or other educational activities. These visas allow longer stays and may provide work authorization, but they require genuine educational enrollment and regular attendance that may not be compatible with digital nomad lifestyles. Volunteer visas offer another pathway for longer-term residence, but require affiliation with registered organizations and documented volunteer activities. The volunteer work must be genuine and ongoing, which can provide meaningful cultural engagement but may limit flexibility for independent travelers. Business visas provide options for people establishing commercial activities in Nepal, but the requirements and restrictions are complex enough to warrant legal consultation. The business registration process involves multiple government departments and procedures that can take months to complete properly. SIM card and phone service setup requires passport presentation and registration procedures that have become more complex in recent years due to security regulations. However, once established, mobile service is reliable and affordable, with data plans that support most digital nomad requirements at costs that are negligible compared to Western standards. Banking services for foreigners involve documentation requirements and procedural steps that can be time-consuming, but are generally manageable for people planning longer-term stays. Opening bank accounts requires multiple visits, various forms of documentation, and patience with procedures that may not follow logical sequences. Internet service installation for longer-term accommodations can take weeks and requires landlord cooperation, multiple appointments, and persistence through technical and bureaucratic challenges. However, the resulting service is generally reliable and fast enough for most remote work requirements at costs that are extremely reasonable. Motorcycle licenses for foreigners require international driving permits from home countries, plus local procedures that vary depending on current regulations and individual circumstances. The bureaucratic requirements can be complex, but motorcycle transportation dramatically improves mobility and reduces transportation costs. Mail and package services operate through systems that may not provide the reliability and security that you're accustomed to for important documents or valuable items. Understanding local postal systems and using alternative services for critical deliveries prevents problems with important correspondence or shipments. Embassy registration for longer-term residents provides important backup support for emergency situations and ensures that you'll be contacted in case of major emergencies or political developments. Most embassies recommend registration for stays longer than a few weeks, and the process is generally straightforward. Legal documentation storage becomes important for longer-term residents who need to maintain access to important documents while protecting them from loss, theft, or damage in accommodations that may lack secure storage options. Having both physical and digital copies stored in multiple locations provides important security. Emergency contact systems require adaptation to local communication infrastructure and may need to include multiple contact methods to ensure reliability. Understanding how to contact emergency services, medical facilities, and embassy assistance provides important safety nets for serious situations. Tax obligations for longer-term residents can be complex and may involve both home country and Nepalese tax requirements depending on income sources, residence duration, and specific circumstances. Understanding these obligations before they become problems prevents legal and financial complications. What becomes clear through navigating these practical requirements is that establishing yourself in Nepal requires patience, flexibility, and willingness to adapt to systems that prioritize personal relationships and cultural understanding over efficient procedural completion. But once established, these systems provide access to a lifestyle and community that offers something increasingly rare in our globalized world. As we reach the end of this journey through Nepal's possibilities, what emerges isn't just a budget breakdown or travel guide. It's a window into a different way of living that challenges fundamental assumptions about what constitutes a good life, what money can buy, and what really matters when we strip away the expensive distractions of modern consumer culture. Nepal does not just offer the possibility of living well for $500 a month. It offers the possibility of living better than you might have imagined possible at any price. When your basic needs are met for amounts that barely register as expenses, you're freed to focus on experiences, relationships, and personal growth in ways that expensive lifestyles often prevent rather than enable. The mountain sunrises don't cost extra. The temple ceremonies that connect you to spiritual traditions thousands of years old are free to respectful observers. The conversations with locals who invite you into their homes for meals cost nothing but cultural curiosity and basic human kindness. The sense of community that develops when you become a regular at neighborhood chai shops can't be purchased. It can only be earned through consistency and genuine engagement. What Nepal teaches you is that abundance isn't about having access to endless options and premium services. It's about having enough security to be present, enough community to feel connected, and enough beauty in your daily environment to feel grateful rather than constantly wanting more. These aren't consolation prizes for not being able to afford expensive lifestyles. They're discoveries about what actually creates satisfaction and meaning in human life. The $500 isn't magic. It's what becomes possible when you align your lifestyle with local realities, rather than trying to recreate expensive foreign standards in cheap locations. It's what happens when you choose integration over isolation, adaptation over resistance, experience over consumption. It's the financial expression of choosing to be part of a place rather than just visiting it with different currency. But here's what might be the most important realization. Nepal changes you in ways that make returning to expensive lifestyles feel unnecessary rather than unaffordable. When you've experienced genuine community, authentic spirituality, and daily contact with natural beauty, the expensive substitutes that urban consumer culture offers start to feel hollow rather than desirable. The people you meet in Nepal who seem happy despite having very little in material terms are, and putting on a show for tourists. They've discovered something about human satisfaction that consumer culture actively discourages us from understanding. They're not rich in money, but they're rich in time, relationships, meaning, and connection to place in ways that money often fails to provide. This doesn't mean Nepal is utopia or that poverty should be romanticized. Real hardships exist, and many Nepalese people struggle with economic challenges that limit their options and opportunities. But what's remarkable is how often happiness, community, and dignity flourish even in circumstances that would be considered challenging by Western standards. What Nepal offers is an escape from reality. It's engagement with different realities that might teach you something about what you actually need to live well. It's not about giving up ambition or settling for less. It's about discovering what more might actually mean when you're freed from the expensive treadmill of constantly upgrading your lifestyle to match your income. The question isn't whether you can live in Nepal for $500 a month. Clearly you can, and live well. The question is whether you're ready for what living in Nepal might teach you about yourself, your values, and what you actually want from life. Because once you've experienced a life where money doesn't dominate every decision, where community is genuine rather than performed, and where beauty is part of daily experience rather than weekend escape, it becomes very difficult to go back to seeing expensive lifestyles as automatically better lifestyles. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just think about Nepal as a budget destination or a gap year adventure. Think about it as a laboratory for experimenting with different approaches to living well. Think about it as a place where you might discover aspects of yourself that expensive cities don't allow space for. Think about it as an opportunity to learn from cultures that have sustained themselves for centuries without depending on the consumption patterns that are making much of the modern world increasingly expensive and unsustainable. If you're ready to find out what $500 can actually buy when it's spent wisely in a place that values the right things, Nepal is waiting. But be warned, you might discover that what you find there makes everywhere else seem overpriced, not because Nepal is cheap, but because you've learned what wealth actually looks like when it's not measured purely in currency. The mountains will still be there when you're ready. The question is, are you ready for what the mountains might teach you about what it means to live rich?